recognized in Parliament. Thank you.
Very good.
Will all those opposed to what the member is moving please say nay? Resuming debate, the Honourable Member for Shefford, with 4 minutes remaining after question period to conclude her speech.
Déclaration de député, statements by members. The Honourable Member for Davenport.
Madam Speaker, it was an honour to meet Portuguese President Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa, his Foreign Minister João Gomes Carvinho, and other members of the Portuguese Parliament who were formally welcomed to Canada by our Prime Minister. They were in Canada to celebrate 70 years of Portuguese immigration to Canada and to strengthen Canada-Portuguese relations. It was an outstanding visit highlighting the extraordinary contributions of the now 500,000 Portuguese Canadians. It was also a pleasure to have them visit my riding of Davenport for a tour of Little Portugal and for the groundbreaking ceremony of the Magellan Centre, a transformational housing project that will provide Portuguese Canadian seniors 57 affordable rental homes and 256 long-term care beds. President Rebelo de Sousa reminded Portuguese Canadians that they are the pride of Portugal, keeping the Portuguese identity alive for decades while also contributing to Canadian society. As our Prime Minister has said, diversity is truly our strength, and Canada is indeed stronger because of the meaningful contributions of the Portuguese community to our nation. Viva Canada and Viva Portugal. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Parry Sound, Muskoka.
Mr. Speaker, this summer I was proud to host the Scotty charity golf tournament in my riding. We raised over $100,000 for charities in Parry Sound, Muskoka. I'd like to thank our generous presenting sponsor Andy Kidd and Devonley Homes, and the gold sponsors Telek Inc., HLD Muskoka, and the Burry family for their generous support. Over 150 participants came together to raise funds for Community Living Huntsville, which is building a sixplex for persons with developmental disabilities, Mind Aid Muskoka, which helps young people and families navigate the complex mental health systems, and of course the Stan Darling Environmental Fund. This is in memory of the legendary former Member of Parliament for Parry Sound Muskoka, Stan Darling, who was a passionate advocate for the environment and really one of the main reasons we have an acid rain treaty with the United States today. We will ensure his legacy lives on through scholarships for students in his name. And a big thanks to Mike Malone for making it all happen. I couldn't do it without him. And I can't wait until next summer when the Scotty travels to Parry Sound, where we'll gather at Rocky Crest Golf Club to raise more money for more amazing organizations in Parry Sound, Muskoka. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Nepean.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is my pleasure to host and celebrate Kurdish Heritage Day on Parliament Hill yesterday with hundreds of Kurdish Canadians. Recently, I visited Kurdistan region of Iraq, which, like Canada, is a wonderful place where people of several different religious faiths coexist peacefully. I met Yazidi people at Camp Sharia and Yazidi community leaders at their holy temple in Lalish. The Foreign Minister of KRI, Safin Diazi, who is visiting Canada, attended the first Kurdish Heritage Day on Parliament Hill. I would like to recognize and thank Shwan Najim, President of Kurdish Diaspora Center Ottawa chapter, for his immense contribution to making the event a grand success. I also thank the leaders of the Kurdish Canadian community who came from many different places in Canada and made this event memorable. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Député de Thérèse de Blainville. The Honourable Member for Thérèse de Blainville. Mr. Speaker, this month I had the good fortune to take part in an event celebrating 40 years of service at Atelier Altitude. Atelier Altitude is a popular educational organization whose mission is to maintain and develop the autonomy, social skills, and abilities of adults living with an intellectual disability. Through craft workshops, training, and various activities, Atelier Altitude is a key player in the community life of Thérèse de Blainville. I'd like to commend the commitment of the organization's volunteers and staff, whose work is outstanding. Your accomplishments are essential, and you make a big difference to the people you support. Once again, From the bottom of my heart, thank you. L'honorable député. The honourable member for Nickel Belt. Mr. Speaker, September 25th is the anniversary of the raising of the Franco-Ontarian flag at the University of Sudbury. As a parliamentary secretary to the Minister of Official Languages and proud Francophone, I'd like to thank all the partners who keep the Francophonie alive, the ACFO Health Centres, Richelieu, Calumet and Cano Clubs, Boreal College, the Francophone Women's Alliance, and the 12 French language school boards in Ontario. Also, congratulations to Marks Day Warren, which on Friday declared itself a bilingual town. Also this afternoon, with the West Nipissing Historical Society, my Aunt Florence Serret will share the many books that celebrate our culture and pride in our identity. Attache Tatuc, J'ai mon voyage, Ça a pas de sacré bon sens, and even a book on French slang, Shut the Front Door. I invite all Francophones and Francophiles to celebrate today.
Anglophones and multilanguage allies across Canada. Merci, Miigwech.
The honourable member for Abbotsford.
Next year, the government will expose the most vulnerable Canadians to medical assistance in dying. Assisted suicide will be available to those who suffer from mental illness, including depression. This is profoundly wrong and unprecedented. There's no consensus in the mental health community that MAID can be safely and ethically administered to the mentally ill. Issues of suicidality, irremediability, and competency are far from being resolved, and there's growing fear amongst persons with disabilities over the slippery slope our country finds itself on. Who's next? The veterans suffering from PTSD, the poor who have no escape from poverty, the addicted on our streets with no hope of accessing timely treatment? And that's why I've tabled Bill C-314, the Mental Health Protection Act. It repeals that portion of Canada's MAID laws that capture the mentally disordered while preserving the remaining elements of the government's MAID regime. I encourage my colleagues to vote in favour of Bill C-314.
L'honorable député de
The honourable member for Vaudreuil-Soulanges.
To recognize and congratulate the Hudson Village Theatre on their 30th anniversary. Created by Heather Markgraf, a Hudson resident and theatre educator in the summer of 1993, the Hudson Village Theatre has grown to become a staple in our community and the largest off-island English theatre in Quebec. In 2000, the community came together in support of the theatre and raised enough money to buy the historic Hudson train station, which was first built in 1890. Now, the station has transformed into a stage auditorium with seating for 148 people and regular programming year-round. I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to the theatre team Kalina Skalska, John Sheridan, Peter Vatsis, Dean Patrick Fleming, Karen Bergen, and Sarah Oakes, as well as the board members Elizabeth Corker, Glenn Lucas, Helen Hodgson, Marion Kuiper, Amelia Robinson, Jerry Semmelhack, Peter Leslie Freud, Michel Levanceur, and of course everyone who has stepped up over the years to make this incredible dream a reality, Mr. Speaker. Cheers to many, many more decades to come. Let the show go on.
the honourable member for Cloverdale, Langley City.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the year was 1958. John Diefenbaker was Prime Minister of Canada, and the 24th session of Parliament began on May 12th. Tommy Douglas was the Premier of Saskatchewan, and Terry Fox was born that year. The Avro Arrow flew out for the first time, Canada-wide television started, and the Canadian Football League was established. Go Riders. Arguably, the best news event of 1958 was when my parents, Don and Kay Aldag, were married in southwestern Saskatchewan at the Good Hope Lutheran Church. My parents raised our family, including my siblings, Debbie and Rick, on the family farm that my great-grandparents homesteaded, instilling the values of hard work and optimism even during the most challenging of times. This past summer, our family celebrated Mom and Dad's 65th wedding anniversary. Thank you to my parents for their unwavering support for myself and my siblings. Happy anniversary, Mom and Dad. I love you.
The honourable member for Calgary, Forest Lawn.
Mr. Speaker, I want to express my sincerest condolences to the family of Bhai Hardeep Singh Nijjar on their loss due to this outrageous assassination. In June, Conservatives called on the RCMP to conduct a full investigation into this murder, reiterated in strongest terms by the Conservative leader just last week. Canadians must be safe from extrajudicial killings of all kinds, most of all from foreign governments. We call on the Indian government to act with full transparency in the investigation investigation of this murder so the truth comes out. Conservatives brought forward a Foreign Agent Registry Bill S-237 nearly 2 years ago and is still being blocked by the NDP Liberal coalition. Only Conservatives brought forward any meaningful action on foreign interference. This registry would have exposed foreign agents operating in Canada on behalf of foreign governments. NDP Liberals need to stop the talk and take meaningful action. Join us and pass this bill immediately so Canadians and the Sangat can feel safe. Those who assassinated by Hardeep Singh Nijjar must be exposed and brought to justice.
The honourable member for Coquitlam, Port Coquitlam.
Mr. Speaker, it is with regret that I rise today in this place to honour RCMP Constable Rick O'Brien of the Ridge Meadows Detachment, who last Friday was struck down in the line of duty while executing a search warrant in Coquitlam. Words cannot ever encompass a tragedy like this. Nevertheless, on behalf of myself and my family, on behalf of all the residents of Coquitlam and Port Coquitlam, and indeed the whole of the Tri-Cities area, and I dare say on behalf of all of us in this place, I would like to express my deepest sadness and most profound condolences to Constable O'Brien's wife and children. And to his many friends and colleagues. All of whom will feel his absence forever. Maintain le droit.
The honourable member for Pitt Meadows, Maple Ridge.
Mr. Speaker, on Friday, Ridge Meadows RCMP Constable Rick O'Brien was shot and killed. 2 other detachment officers were also wounded as they were executing a drug search warrant in Coquitlam. Previously, Rick worked many years with at-risk youth. This is devastating for his wife and 6 children. Ridge Meadows RCMP Superintendent Wendy Mahat stated, Rick's contribution to his work and his fellow members was immeasurable. Rick loved visiting schools, helping students, and supporting our detachment with food drives and sports events. He was truly exceptional. His death is senseless and heartbreaking. Sunday was Police and Peace Officers National Memorial Day. Over the past year, 12 officers have lost their lives in the line of duty, the most ever. May we as a nation be more appreciative of the men and women in our police forces. May God bless them, and may God sustain the O'Brien family.
The honourable member for Edmonton, Mill Woods.
Let me begin by offering my sincere condolences to Bhai Hardeep Singh Nijjar's family. I also did so in person with his son soon after his assassination. An assassination of a Canadian on Canadian soil in the parking lot of a Gurdwara. At that time in June and now, we call on the RCMP for a full investigation. We call on the Indian government to act with utmost transparency in this investigation because these allegations represent an outrageous affront to Canada's sovereignty. Mr. Speaker, Canadians must be kept safe from extrajudicial killings of all kinds, most of all from foreign governments. Canadians must be protected on Canadian soil. It is for this reason that Conservatives brought forward a Foreign Agent Registry, Bill S-237, in November of 2021, which continues to be blocked by this Liberal NDP government. If this bill was passed 2 years ago, when Conservatives proposed it, foreign agents working to intimidate, influence, and even assassinate a Canadian citizen could have been stopped. Mr. Speaker, we must work together to protect Canadians from foreign interference and to ensure that Bhai Hardeep Singh Nijjar's killers are brought to justice.
Hear, hear.
The honourable member for Aurora, Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill.
That's you there. Oh. Merci.
Thank you. September 25th is Franco-Ontarian Flag Day, which is very important for many reasons. First, we're celebrating Franco-Ontarians, but at the same time, all Francophones in Canada. the fact that we're a country with 2 official languages, 2 cultures of origin, that continue to this day to be a source of pride that we should celebrate. I'm proud of our French roots and Francophone cultures, but also of the recognition of other cultures, too, that enrich our country. I'm thinking primarily of First Nations who were here long before the English or the French, but also all the other more recent immigrants who have arrived in Canada. In my riding, I'd like to particularly thank the Tri Blanc, the York Region Association of Francophones, and Partager le Français. All these groups are working to promote the French language and culture in our region. Happy Franco-Ontarian Flag Day to all.
The Honourable Member for North Island, Powell River.
Mr. Speaker, every day in my riding, people work, live, and play on the ocean. For many people, they do it all year round. These folks go to very remote locations where a boat or a float plane is the only mode of transportation. To do this safely, my constituents rely on weather stations. If they do not have that information, they travel at a higher risk. Some weather stations in my region have not been working for months and in some cases, years. Both my constituents and I have reached out to the Ministry of Transportation, Environment, and Climate Change calling for action. One of my constituents told me that he goes out in his boat during the winter. All too often, the weather stations are offline. He uses whatever information he can, but once he is out there, Mr. Speaker, there is no turning back. They deal with the weather as they arrive, and it can feel like they are taking their own lives into their hands. This is an issue of safety, of protecting communities, protecting workers, protecting people. It needs urgent action. I am calling on this government to make it right. Lives are at stake.
The Honourable Member for La Pointe de l'Île. Mr. Speaker, on this September 25th, it's the Franco-Ontarian Flag Day, which commemorates the very first time the Franco-Ontarian flag was raised in Sudbury in 1975. Creating a flag is defining one's identity. And on the flag, Franco-Ontarians put the white trillium, the flower of Ontario, and the lily, the symbol of Francophone America. And when you put such an image on a flag, it's not just a graphic, it's a reminder of our duty of solidarity to protect French. A reminder that respect for our language in North America is more than ever a daily struggle, and we're in it together. Because Damien Robitaille, Catherine Levac, and Véronique Dicker, because of them, we continue together to applaud Francophones in Ontario and in Quebec. To my Franco-Ontarian brothers and sisters, have a great day. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Official Opposition and Member for Carleton is proving himself more than ever to be the common-sense leader Canada needs. On September 2nd in Quebec City, in front of more than 2,500 Canadians from coast to coast, he told us what his government will look like. In that speech, he rightly pointed out that raising taxes, like the Liberals are planning, and drastically, like the Bloc Québécois wants, is not the way to reduce pollution. That requires concrete, effective, realistic, and responsible action. He said, to fight the real problem of climate change, we need more hydroelectricity and we need it fast. My common sense plan uses technology, not taxes, by incentivizing companies to reduce emissions, by giving the green light to green projects, by producing green minerals here, not imported from China. The Bloc and the Liberals choose taxes. I choose technology. Mr. Speaker, more than ever, Canada needs our common sense team.
The Honourable Member for Humber River, Black Creek.
Mr. Speaker, in a memorable viral moment, celebrities, athletes, and even MPs dumped buckets of ice on their heads to raise awareness for ALS, a disease not many had heard of, but impacts thousands of people, usually with a life expectancy of 2 to 5 years. This trend attracted worldwide attention and generated significant funding for ALS research. Unfortunately, it was short-lived, and the momentum behind ALS advocacy drifted. This issue is particularly poignant for this House as we fondly remember the late Honourable Muriel Boulanger, who tragically succumbed to this disease. This summer, I met two courageous young girls in Washington, D.C., Clara and Ellie, who persist in raising awareness and establishing an ALS youth platform for affected young individuals. Today, I extend gratitude to the MPs who joined our reception to discuss ways to find a cure for ALS. Additionally, we appreciate Clara and Ellie, as well as their parents, Mark and Rebecca Wetzel, present in the House today for their dedicated involvement in a battle we all need to embrace and support. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Bravo, bravo, bravo. Oral questions, question orale, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
La nouvelle.
The news that the House of Commons paid homage to a Nazi Waffen-SS officer here at the House of Commons has upset the world and embarrassed Canada. It hindered the victims of the Holocaust and gave a tool of propaganda to Russia. The Prime Minister, and only the Prime Minister, is responsible for the success of international visitors here in Canada. Will he take responsibility for this massive issue that he helped to cause? The Honourable Government House Leader. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Like every member here in this House, I was extremely disappointed with this situation, and personally, as someone who was a descendant of a Jewish survivor, I was very disappointed, like everyone here. And as the Leader of the Opposition well knows, and as you mentioned, Mr. Speaker, it was your decision and yours alone. Neither the government or the Ukrainian delegation knew about this ahead of time, and it's something that we are all very disappointed by. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The question was for the Prime Minister, because indeed it is the Prime Minister's sole responsibility to guarantee the diplomatic success of major world leaders who come to this country. It is the Prime Minister whose government is responsible for both security and diplomatic vetting of everyone that comes in close proximity of a foreign leader on Canadian soil, particularly a foreign leader who is at war. The government has now admitted that they vetted everyone who was in attendance that day. Will the Prime Minister apologize for having vetted this individual and letting him come anyway?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, like all members of this chamber, I am incredibly disappointed in the fact that this individual was invited, as you yourself, Mr. Speaker, have confirmed by you, was recognized in the gallery. I found out, just like every other member in this House at that time, that this individual was present. This is deeply embarrassing for us as parliamentarians, as Canadians, and it is something that I think all of us take extremely seriously, and I would ask my honourable colleagues not to politicize this moment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is responsible. He is in Ottawa today. He can get on his feet and answer for his massive diplomatic embarrassment and shame.
Stand up.
That minister admitted that the government vetted every single person that was here for the speech. That was the job of the government, which has an entire security and diplomatic apparatus set up for that purpose. Will he finally take responsibility for his latest embarrassment and apologize to Canadians for this massive mistake?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, as a descendant of Jewish Holocaust survivors, I am personally very hurt by the fact that this chamber recognized this individual. And I am sure that everyone feels the same way in this chamber. The Parliamentary Protective Service had the appropriate screening in place to ensure the security of last Friday's event, and that is what I was referring to, Mr. Speaker. But what I can continue to say is that we all must take this seriously because it is hurting many communities.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
It is the job of the Government of Canada, the Privy Council Office, which is the Prime Minister's personal department, the Prime Minister's security forces in the RCMP, to vet every single person that comes within proximity of a high-profile foreign war leader who is involved in a very difficult conflict right now. It was the job of the Prime Minister to protect that foreign leader from this massive embarrassment. If the Prime Minister failed to have vetting in place, then that in itself is a massive act of incompetence. Will he take responsibility and apologize for that?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, I would again ask the Leader of the Opposition to not politicize this issue. He knows just as well as everyone else in this chamber that the decision to invite this individual was yours, Mr. Speaker, and yours alone, that you did not inform the government or the Ukrainian delegation that you were inviting him or that you would recognize him. You made that public yesterday. The Leader of the Opposition knows that, and I would ask that he sticks to the facts. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, very good.
Leader of the Opposition.
Well, if the Prime Minister is so proud of how he conducted himself, he would be on the floor in the House of Commons today answering questions. Instead of hiding under a rock. Canadians are sick and tired of a Prime Minister.
Honourable members, that the presence in the gallery, all MPs have duties in the chamber and outside. I just want to remind them that referring to their presence or absence is not allowed in the rules. The Honourable Opposition Leader, please continue.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians are sick and tired of a Prime Minister who never takes responsibilities for the things that happen under his watch, whether it's the record high inflation or interest rates or the doubling of housing costs or the constant international embarrassments. He always finds someone else to throw under the bus. Are you that person?
Mr. Speaker, I know the Leader of the Opposition doesn't want to rely on the facts, but the facts in this situation are that the government had no prior knowledge that this individual was being invited, nor that he would be recognized. And if they go back and recall what happened on Friday, they will see that it was indeed the Speaker of the House that recognized this individual. We were all caught off guard. It's deeply embarrassing to this Parliament, but to Canada, and I ask that we all deal with this responsibly. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Mr. Speaker, there are serious consequences to what happened in this chamber Friday. The world's media are talking about it, and already the Russian media is using this to spread propaganda. In a war, this kind of propaganda can encourage the recruitment of Russian soldiers to go to the front against Ukraine. An event like this can harm the search for international support. It's dramatic because we're in the world of war and the repercussions are real. What does the government intend to do to repair the damage caused by Friday's event? The Honourable Government House Leader. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for his question. As I said, this incident is very painful for everyone here in this chamber and, of course, for all Canadians, particularly Canadians who have families that were affected by the Holocaust, namely Jewish communities and those in Eastern Europe. This is something that is very painful, and it was really something that I was personally disappointed by, and I would ask everyone to work responsibly. Thank you. The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Mr. Speaker, I'm talking about the harmful effects of this effect for the Ukrainian war effort, but we mustn't forget our fellow citizens of Jewish faith and all those who were victims of the Nazis during World War II. If there are still executioners alive and there are still victims, our thoughts go out to them. We must show that this House and this government do not take Friday's event lightly for all those affected in one way or another. What will the government do to repair this tragic blunder? The Honourable Government House Leader. As I said, everyone in this House is deeply hurt by what took place last Friday. We were all taken by surprise, and it's something that it was totally unacceptable. There are communities across Canada, Jewish communities, and Eastern European communities for whom Holocaust and World War II were particularly painful. As a descendant of a Holocaust survivor, something I take very seriously, and I think this is time for everyone to reflect.
Over East.
What happened last Friday never should have happened. Now, turning to another crisis. The last 30 years has demonstrated that successive Liberal and Conservative governments' market-driven approach to housing has failed Canadians. Housing serves as a social good. It should not just be treated as a commodity for greater profits. People need housing that they can afford, and waiving the GST for new rentals is not enough. Will the Prime Minister commit to creating an acquisition fund for the nonprofit sector to help stop the loss of low-cost rentals to profiteering landlords?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister for Housing.
Mr. Speaker, I thank my honourable colleague for her question and for her advocacy for non-market housing. We need to continue to do more, and we know that although the recent measure to remove the GST from apartment construction is going to have an enormous impact, it's not enough on its own. We're going to continue to make investments in low-cost financing to build more homes that ordinary people can actually afford. We've advanced programs in the past and will continue to in the future to directly subsidize the kinds of homes that low-income people need to build. We don't have a monopoly on good ideas, Mr. Speaker. We're willing to take feedback from members of all parties in this House. I look forward to continuing my collaboration with the member opposite in that regard.
The member for Vancouver East.
Well, then commit to creating an acquisition fund. Now, let me say this. The Liberal plan is not working. The minister should know that relying on market forces will not solve the problem. That's what the Liberals and Conservatives did for the last 30 years. Look where it got us. The average rent in Canada is now over $2,100 a month. In Vancouver, it's over $3,000. Time for bold action. Will the minister commit to building 2 million units of social housing to meet the needs of the community?
The Honourable Minister of Housing.
Mr. Speaker, I agree with the member opposite that building market housing is not enough, but we must also increase the supply of market housing in the market. Mr. Speaker, we need to encourage the construction of homes for low-income Canadians. We need to encourage the construction of homes for middle-class Canadians. As we move forward with a measure that's going to allow people to build more market-based homes, we're also advancing measures that are going to disproportionately have a positive impact on builders that are seeking to build homes for low-income families outside of the traditional market. There is no silver bullet to the housing crisis. We will pull every lever at our disposal to make things right.
The Honourable Member for Charleswood St. James, Assiniboia, Headingley.
On Friday, a Nazi received a standing ovation in this House. Today is Yom Kippur. The Jewish community, my community, is horrified. Only one office in the country is responsible for vetting visitors to this place, the Prime Minister's office. When the Ukrainian president, a head of state, addresses this House during a time of war, the Prime Minister's office is responsible for security. Full stop. This scandal is entirely on the Prime Minister's office. Did they vet this Nazi and not care, or not vet him and are completely incompetent?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, as a Canadian of Jewish origin, I've shared very clearly with this House on several occasions how disturbing this event is for me personally, but I also know for Canadians who are Jewish right across this country, and particularly today on Yom Kippur, the holiest day in the Jewish calendar, the Day of Atonement, as we prepare for the new year. This is particularly disturbing. However, I do have to correct my honourable colleague in the sense that the government was not aware that this individual was invited. It was completely the prerogative of the Speaker. It was his decision, and we need to make sure that the facts remain on the table. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah, very good.
The Honourable Member for Charleswood St. James, Assiniboia Headingley.
Shame on that member and that government for not taking responsibility. The Prime Minister has the massive security apparatus of the state at his disposal, and yet a Nazi was honored in this place. I can't believe I'm even uttering these words, Mr. Speaker. Canada has been embarrassed around the world. Shame on this government for bringing shame on this chamber. My late grandparents are turning in their graves. A simple Google search would have revealed this person's background. And so again, did they vet this Nazi and simply not care, or did they not vet this Nazi and are completely incompetent?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I would again ask the honourable colleague to stick to the facts, because we know, and he knows, because you have stated publicly and in this chamber that it was your decision to invite this individual, your decision alone to recognize him in the chamber. We were all caught off guard on Friday. Everyone in this chamber stood because we trusted the Speaker to know who this was, but at the same time, we must all take this seriously, and we must not politicize this. Communities are hurting, and we need to be there to be united at this time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For Regina Capel.
I was Speaker when the government changed the law to ensure that the House of Commons Security reported to the government. That was done for very specific reasons, Mr. Speaker, one of which was the fact that the House of Commons itself doesn't have the resources to do comprehensive vetting and background checks. That is why the change was made. Nobody believes that it's up to your office to do comprehensive background checks. There's only one entity that has access to CSIS information and RCMP intelligence. How did the government let someone who fought for the Waffen-SS into this chamber?
Mr. Speaker, I have tremendous respect for my colleague opposite. He was the Speaker. He's the House Leader now. He knows how this chamber operates. He knows that the Speaker has prerogative for who they invite to the Speaker's gallery. The Parliamentary Protective Service followed all screening protocols to ensure the security of the event on Friday. Nevertheless, neither the government nor the Ukrainian delegation were aware of that individual's presence until he was recognized by the Speaker. Those are the facts. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Regina Capel.
Mr. Speaker, it's the government that is politicizing this issue. For refusing to accept their responsibility. There is only one group of individuals who have control over who has access to a foreign head of state. A head of state who is fighting for his country's life against an illegal invasion by Russia. And the Prime Minister has a duty of care for that entire visit. Now the government House Leader is trying to change her tune and say, yes, there was information gathered, list was gathered, but vetting wasn't done. What's the point of gathering a list of invitees if they're not doing any background checks?
The Honourable Government House
Mr. Speaker, let me continue to lay out the facts for this chamber. It is a fact that that individual was not granted access to neither the President of Ukraine nor the Prime Minister of this country. He was specifically invited by the Speaker of the House, who did not make either the Government of Canada or the Ukrainian delegation aware. We all found out at the same time when he was recognized in the chamber. We are all deeply embarrassed by this. It has embarrassed Canada, and we must reiterate our strong support and allyship for Ukraine, Ukrainian Canadians, as well as Jewish communities.
The Honourable Member for Charlesbourg-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, last Friday we had the privilege of welcoming the President of Ukraine here in the House. Unfortunately, amongst the special guests was a Nazi. When a large-scale event takes place, the PMO has the duty to be aware of it and to take control of it. This scandal is entirely owing to the PMO. It's one of two things. Either they did background checks and didn't see a problem with this individual, or the PMO didn't do a background check and it's entirely incompetent. Which is it? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to repeat for my honourable colleague what I've already said, because these are the facts and this is the truth. Neither the government nor the Ukrainian delegation knew ahead of time that this individual was invited or that the speaker would recognize them during their speech. We are all very disturbed and disappointed by this event. It is something that affects parliamentarians, Canada, and of course our reputation internationally. It's something everyone has to take seriously. The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, all members in this House expect the government to do research on guests here at the Parliament, but after welcoming an individual who is a member of a Nazi branch responsible for the murder of many Jews, our trust is forever shaken. Such a shame, not only to welcome such a person, but to praise them, ignoring his war crimes. All of Canada is humiliated. Will the PM apologize to his parliamentary colleagues, to Canadians, and to the international community, and especially to Jewish Canadians? The Honourable Government House Leader. As a Canadian of Jewish origin, I'm very hurt by what took place Friday. My grandfather was a survivor of Auschwitz, and this is something that hurts me deeply, as it does all members in this House. But the facts are the facts. It was the Speaker of the House of Commons that invited this individual. He decided to recognize them here in the House, and no one in the government or in the Ukrainian delegation was aware of this ahead of time. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Terrebonne. Mr. Speaker, a wind of bankruptcy is blowing over our businesses, and it's only the beginning. According to the Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses, 250,000 SMEs may close this year because they can no longer repay their CEBA loans on time. It's wrong to claim, as Ottawa does, that extending the deadline by 3 months will miraculously solve everything. The federal government has to offer deferrals and special arrangements to small businesses that need them. Otherwise, they'll go bankrupt. When will this government offer flexibility to struggling SMEs instead of watching them die? The Honourable Minister. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for her question. We understand very well that this inflationary context globally does have a sizable impact on our companies and everyone. The cost of living is tough. We are offering flexibility for these emergency loans. Companies will be able to benefit from this flexibility in a tough fiscal framework. So I think this is a balanced measure and also sensitive to the fact that entrepreneurs do still need government, and we'll be there to support them. The Honourable Member. It doesn't solve everything, 3 months. 1,900 businesses have already gone bankrupt in Quebec, and that's just the beginning. CEBA is a government program, not a banking service. It was set up by the government, and it's the government that companies in difficulty want to negotiate with and reach agreements with. It's the government's responsibility today to ensure that our SMEs avoid bankruptcy, not the role, rather, of financial institutions. So when will this government assume its responsibilities towards our SMEs? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Speaker, Mr. Speaker, the CEBA program provided unprecedented support to nearly 900,000 small businesses, totaling over $49 billion of financial support. Last year, our government extended the forgiveness qualification deadline by 1 year to the end of this year. As we have traveled this country listening to businesses, we have asked for more flexibility, who have asked for more flexible repayment options and time. That is why we recently announced a full 1 year extension on the term loan repayment deadline to the end of 2026, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Berthier-Maskinongé. Mr. Speaker, this is particularly serious for our farmers. They are the hardest hit by rising interest rates, and climate change is ravaging their crops. They're already 2 feet deep in debt, partly because the federal government doesn't do enough to support our farmers. And on top of that, Ottawa is asking them to get deeper in debt with their bank within 3 months, or they have to pay back their entire CEBA loan. Mr. Speaker, will this government finally show some flexibility instead of forcing SMEs, farmers, into bankruptcy?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate my honourable colleague's question, and I'm sure the Quebec farmers and farmers right across the country understand and see exactly what climate change is doing with the heavy rains, the floods, the strong winds, and that's, of course, why with the provinces and territories we have the business risk management programs in order to make sure that we're able to assist farmers in these difficult situations. We have and will continue to make sure that we support the Agricultural Clean Technology Program and the Climate Solution Programs. This all helps with the environment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The member for Sturgeon River Parkland.
Mr. Speaker, the inclusion of an SS member in Parliament during President Zelensky's speech is unacceptable and embarrassing. But what is further embarrassing is an admission from this government that they did not do proper background checks on everyone that was in this Parliament. President Zelensky is a target of death from the Russian regime. His security in Canada should be our highest priority. The minister in charge of parliamentary security must be held to account. For if a Nazi was allowed in this Parliament, how can we know that this government took all precautions necessary to ensure the protection of President Zelensky?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, as I have already stated, the Parliamentary Protective Service followed all screening protocols to ensure the security of last Friday's event. I agree with the member opposite in that it was profoundly embarrassing for Parliament and for Canada that this individual was both invited and recognized. However, as that member knows, and as all members know, it was the Speaker of this chamber that decided to invite this individual and recognize him. We were all caught off guard, and we are all hurting because of it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Selkirk Interlake Eastman.
Ukraine has survived multiple genocides at the hands of both the Soviets and the Nazis. The Holodomor, the Holocaust, the Siglerneck of the Crimean Tatars. So it's shocking that a self-professed Nazi was allowed into this chamber by the Liberals and officially recognized by the Speaker during the state visit of the President of Ukraine. The Liberals abdicated their duty of care responsibilities to President Zelensky during his state visit. So will the Prime Minister officially apologize to President Zelensky for his incompetence and indeed apologize to all the people of Ukraine?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, as I have stated, I think that episode on Friday was one of profound embarrassment for parliamentarians and for all Canadians. As has been stated clearly, the Parliamentary Protective Services did all of the required security protocols to ensure the security of the event. However, neither the government nor the Ukrainian delegation was aware this individual would be present in the gallery, nor that he would be recognized until such a time as the Speaker did that. The Speaker has made that public and clear, and we were owed and received an apology.
The Honourable Member for Selkirk Interlake Eastman.
Well, this is more than an embarrassment. It's disgusting. Zelensky is Jewish who lost family in the Holocaust. The Ukrainian Defense Minister, Rustem Umerov, is a Muslim Crimean Tatar who was born in the gulags. I'm angry that this liberal incompetence is playing right into the hands of Russian disinformation. Due to the Liberals' negligence, the government is eroding support for Ukraine against Russia's illegal invasion. So will the Prime Minister accept responsibility for embarrassing Canada and undermining Ukraine on the world stage?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, as a descendant of a Jewish Holocaust survivor, this is something that is profoundly disturbing and upsetting to me, as it is to everyone in Canada whose family has been impacted by the Holocaust, and indeed everyone around the world. It is not lost on me that the President of Ukraine is Jewish, who also suffered the same way as my family did. But I will reiterate to the member opposite, this was not the government's decision, and we had no prior knowledge for this. It was a decision made by the Speaker of the House. He has apologized. We are all owed that apology because it was profoundly embarrassing and disturbing.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Griesbach.
In Edmonton, over 33,000 households pay more in rent than they can afford. Meanwhile, corporate landlords like Boardwalk and Main Street are jacking up rents right across our city and forcing people out onto the streets. The Liberals and Conservatives' plan is to buddy up and cozy up with big real estate CEOs. The NDP's plan is to build more homes that people can actually afford. Will the government commit to building non-market homes and stopping rent evictions so Canadians can keep a roof over their head?
The Honourable Minister of Housing.
Mr. Speaker, I thank my honourable colleague for his question. I would point out that there's actually quite a bit that he and I may agree on. We are going to continue to make the kinds of investments that are going to support low-income families, including in his city of Edmonton and across the country. But it's important that we also advance measures that are going to help increase the supply for middle-class households in this country. When we add more supply to the market, we can actually bring down the cost of homes across the country that people can afford. I'm pleased to work with the honourable member on non-market housing solutions, and we're going to continue to advance measures that will build homes for middle-class families as well.
Honourable Member for Vancouver Kingsway.
Mr. Speaker, Canadian children have been going to school hungry for years, and skyrocketing grocery bills are making things worse. Yet, Canada is the only G7 country without a national school food program. New Democrats have been calling for one for years, and despite their promises, the Liberals have only delayed action and disappointed families. Mr. Speaker, children are going hungry on the Liberals' watch. Why isn't this government delivering a national school food program to help our kids learn?
Here, here.
The Honourable Minister for Health.
Mr. Speaker, and while we've taken historic action to reduce child poverty and see child poverty at one of its lowest levels, it's with hundreds of thousands of children being lifted out of poverty since Stephen Harper's government. It is not enough. The reality is making sure that every child has a good meal is something we want to work with provinces and territories on. That's why we're actively developing a national food policy, working in collaborations with provinces and territories. We're taking action on marketing to kids. We're taking action on front-of-pack labeling. We're making sure that we're doing everything that we can to put the nutrition of our children first.
Honourable Member for Kitchener-Conestoga.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One of the core responsibilities of any government is to keep Canadians safe and to represent their best interests on the global stage. While here at home, we see the government acting on Canadians' priorities through things like the Affordable Housing and Groceries Act, which we're debating today. There's also a need to work with global partners to act against existential threats like climate change, the weaponization of information, and the threat to democracy by a growing authoritarianism. Can the Minister of Foreign Affairs outline the work done by her and her colleagues at the UN General Assembly last week to demonstrate Canadian leadership on tackling these critical issues? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For Foreign Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Canadians know that more than ever what is happening in the world has an impact on their day-to-day lives. And Canada is definitely stepping up on the world stage. Last week at the UN, I co-hosted an arbitrary detention summit along with Secretary Blinken and Michael Kovrig. At this point, the Declaration on Arbitrary Detention is now signed by 75 countries. We also launched a new declaration along with the Netherlands to fight disinformation by states, signed by the UK and US. This is global leadership, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for South Surrey White Rock.
Mr. Speaker, as the Chief Opposition Whip, my office was required to provide a list of names and contact information in advance of President Zelensky's address. That information was shared with the Protocol Office and Parliamentary Protective Services, who report directly to the RCMP, who report to the Minister of Public Safety on operational matters. Does the Prime Minister expect Canadians to believe that he invited a world leader currently at war to our Parliament and he didn't vet the list?
Yeah. The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the government House Leader has made clear our government's disappointment with the events of Friday. All parliamentarians were taken by surprise with this particular individual being invited in the gallery. The opposition whip knows very well that the Parliamentary Protective Service reports to the two speakers, the Speaker of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Commons. And, Mr. Speaker, to pretend otherwise is simply to distance oneself from the facts.
The Honourable Member for South Surrey Whitelock.
Mr. Speaker, I'm dealing with facts, and those are not the facts. The Liberals don't get it. The Prime Minister either knew or ought to have known who was invited to attend. He embarrassed a foreign leader of a country at war and every parliamentarian here. With the resources of RCMP and CSIS at his fingertips, basic due diligence was ignored. Will the Prime Minister take responsibility and explain to Canadians why a Nazi was given a hero's introduction in this House under his watch?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, the member opposite knows, because she's heard it from you this morning and me several times today, that it was not the Prime Minister who either invited this individual or recognized him. She acknowledged that he was recognized during the Speaker's remarks because the facts of the matter are that this individual was invited by the Speaker of the House, was recognized by the Speaker of the House, and did this without informing either the Government of Canada or the Ukrainian delegation. This is profoundly embarrassing to us all, and we all need to take this seriously.
The Honourable Member for Lethbridge.
On Friday, a Nazi was given not only a seat in the chamber, but also given a very warm and honoring welcome. Now, this never should have happened. In fact, a list of all guests was given to this government well ahead of time and was thoroughly vetted. Yet somehow this individual was celebrated. So does the Liberal government truly expect Canadians to believe that they really had no clue?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I have clearly laid the facts on the table several times today, and in fact, the only person who invited this individual and decided to recognize them was the Speaker of the House. The Parliamentary Protective Service followed all security protocols to ensure the security of the event. However, I agree with the member opposite. This should have never happened. This is profoundly embarrassing, profoundly disappointing to all members in this House and to all Canadians. And to that, we stand with all Canadian communities that are impacted and, of course, with Ukraine. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Lethbridge.
There's just no way that this is correct. You have a world leader whose country is at war. He came to Parliament as a state guest. He was granted some of the strictest security that has ever been granted to a world leader prior to him. And yet that individual was here with a Nazi in his presence. And this government would like me and other Canadians to believe that somehow this individual was not thoroughly vetted, that somehow this list was not viewed by the Prime Minister's office. That's what this side of the House, that side of the House, the Prime Minister would like.
The Honourable Government House
In fact, the Speaker has actually already clarified and expressed that this was his decision alone, that he did not inform the government or the Ukrainian delegation, that this was entirely his decision. Mr. Speaker, I cannot, force the Conservative members to believe what the facts are. I can only put them on the table as they are. They have been clearly outlined, and we will continue to stand by them because that is the truth. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
L'Honorable
The Honourable Member for Avignon, Lamitis, Matane, Matapédia. Mr. Speaker, while the Environment Minister was strutting around in New York, he had the nerve to lecture Quebec on the fight against climate change. Meanwhile, he said that his government wasn't just paying lip service. No, they're not just talking the talk, they're walking the walk. But how? What did the Liberals do at the UN Climate Ambition Summit? They opened up thousands more kilometers of marine areas to oil exploration projects. Neither protecting biodiversity nor the climate emergency will stop this government from selling oil. No siree. When are they going to take the future of the planet seriously? The Honourable Environment Minister. I thank my colleague for her question. Last week, it was an honour to accompany the Prime Minister. Canada is the only big oil-producing country which was invited to the UN Climate Ambition Summit. And why were we invited? Because between 2019 and 2021, we were the country with the best GHG reduction performance. And, Mr. Speaker, we're the only G20 country to have cut subsidies to fossil fuels. We did so 2 years earlier than promised, and we were the first country to cap emissions. That's why we were invited. The Honourable Member for Avignon, Lamitis, Matane, Matapédia. Mr. Speaker, I bet there was a lot of champagne and celebration at the World Petroleum Congress in Alberta. What wonderful news that Canada intends to double Newfoundland's oil production by 2030. 200 million barrels a year. And the Minister for the Environment knew it. The government has decided to be an unrivaled leader in the expansion of fossil fuels while the planet burns. We are dangerously moving from irresponsible territory to intentional harm territory. How can the minister, former head of Greenpeace and Équiterre, look at himself in the mirror? How can he agree to do the bidding of oil companies? The Honourable Minister. Thank you. And I urge my colleague to read the speech of my colleague and friend, the Minister of Natural Resources, who said that in today's world, if we want to fight climate changes and we use 120 million barrels a year, in a carbon-neutral, net-zero world, we need to decrease our dependence on oil and gas and fossil fuels especially, and that's what we're doing in Canada in partnership with all of our partners around the world. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. The Prime Minister has the responsibility to vet heads of state who are invited. Now, today, we're supposed to believe that no one in the PMO, no one at Foreign Affairs, no one at Public Safety, no one in the Canada Protocol Office was involved in the process which allowed a Nazi to be invited to have access to these buildings and to stand here a few meters from President Zelensky. Mr. Speaker, after the first terrorist attack at Parliament, the RCMP was given full supervision and responsibility for our security. So how can the Prime Minister claim that they didn't know anything? The Honourable Government House Leader. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The truth is that neither the Prime Minister nor anyone in the Prime Minister's office or anyone in the Ukrainian delegation knew ahead of time that this individual was invited. None of them knew that he would be recognized by the President of the House. As I have said many times, this initiative was an initiative of the House Speaker. The House Speaker elected to invite this person and recognize him. It was incredibly painful for parliamentarians who were present and who were very surprised by that decision. This was very painful for all Canadians who were affected by the Holocaust. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Well, we're all incredibly hurt, Mr. Speaker, by the Prime Minister's lack of responsibility. By negligence or by incompetence, he allowed a Nazi to be recognized in this House. The Protocol Office of Canada is under Global Affairs Canada, and the mandate of that office is to vet official visits, visits of foreign dignitaries, and visits of guests of the government. How can you claim that the Prime Minister was not aware of this? Because the entire government machinery is involved in every single detail of visits like this. For example, like the visit of President Zelensky. The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, my colleague knows because he heard you this morning and read your statement yesterday. He knows, as you clarified, that it was your initiative and yours alone. He knows that you did not warn the government that you were going to invite that individual or recognize him. We are all deeply hurt. We are hurt as parliamentarians and as Canadians. And those who are hurt are communities across the country, are hurt by this decision, which was made by the House Speaker and the House Speaker alone.
Last Friday, a member of the 14th Waffen Grenadier Division of the Nazi SS was celebrated in the presence of President Zelensky. No one believes that the government wouldn't see the list of attendees when a foreign leader attends this chamber. Canada's reputation, damaged. This chamber's reputation, damaged. Our valiant Canadian World War II veterans, shocked and humiliated. Jewish Canadians, horrified. Russia couldn't be happier. Does the Liberal government really expect Canadians to believe they didn't know a Nazi was in this House?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I can only share the facts and the truth, and the truth and the facts are that no, the government didn't know that this individual was invited, nor that he was going to be recognized by the Speaker of this House. As the member opposite heard the Speaker say earlier today, this is an individual that was from his riding. He decided to recognize him. He did not inform either the government or the Ukrainian delegation. This has caused profound hurt and embarrassment to this chamber, to Canada, and to Canadians from so many different backgrounds, Jewish Canadians, Canadians of Eastern European descent, Ukrainian Canadians, and of course to the President of Ukraine.
L'honorable député de Sudbury.
The Honourable Member for Sudbury. Today is Franco-Ontarian Day. It's a day to celebrate Francophone culture, art, traditions, and people in this beautiful province. The French language is a vital part of our culture in Sudbury, Ontario, and across the country. And it's our responsibility to protect it. Can the Minister of Employment, Workforce Development, and Official Languages provide an update on what our government is doing to support the Franco-Ontarian community? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Honourable Member for Sudbury for her question, and I thank her for her incredible advocacy for the Franco-Ontarian community. With our new action plan for official languages, we are supporting official language communities across the country with $4.1 billion to support education, community organizations, and more. So whether you're Francophone, Francophile, or Franco-curious, our government will always support the French language in Ontario and across the country. Happy Franco-Ontarian Day.
The Honourable Member for Barrie Innisfil.
Look, I've sat here during question period and, like all Canadians, have listened to the Liberals deflect and place blame on the Speaker for a Nazi being allowed in this chamber. Like we've seen with so many others, the Prime Minister and apparently his House Leader will go to any length to ruin personal and professional reputations to protect himself. After 8 years, our nation is living through a rotating loop of international humiliation that lays solely at the Prime Minister's feet. Why won't the Prime Minister accept responsibility and apologize to not only this House, our nation, our international partners, and those who have been re-traumatized?
The Honourable Government House
Leader. Mr. Speaker, my honourable colleague heard your statement this morning. He knows very well that this was your decision and your decision alone to invite this individual, to recognize him in the gallery without informing the government, without informing the Ukrainian delegation. We are profoundly hurt by this. We are profoundly embarrassed by this. And I would ask that the Conservative colleagues pay attention to the facts, rely on the facts, and treat this matter with the seriousness that it deserves, because there are communities across the country that are hurting, and politicizing it helps.
The Honourable Member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes.
Time and time again, this Prime Minister and his Liberal House Leader say, I had no idea, it didn't involve me. Time and time again, this Liberal Prime Minister fails in his duties to Canadians and has someone else take the fall. This week, it looks like he's going to come to you, Speaker, and ask you to leave and to take the garbage out with you on the way out. Is that really what this government wants to show to Canadians?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, again, that honourable colleague would have seen your statement yesterday, heard your apology in the House today, where the Speaker confirmed that this was his decision and his decision alone to invite this individual from his riding, to acknowledge him in the gallery. We were all caught off guard by this. We all stood and applauded because we were led to believe that this was an individual who he was not. And that is something that hurts all of us and embarrasses all of us, but there was no prior knowledge from the government.
Member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes.
Canadians expect better than incompetence from their government, and that's what they continue to get. Dozens of questions for this Liberal Prime Minister, and he refuses to stand up and take responsibility for an international embarrassment that lays solely at his feet. And his government House Leader, these Liberals continue to stand, and they want someone else, they want the Speaker to take the fall. Canadians deserve better. We know that. Why don't these Liberals know that Canadians deserve better?
Right.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, again, I would invite my colleagues on the Conservative benches to rely on the facts that you have laid out, both in a statement as well as in an apology to this House, that it was you who decided to invite this individual, that you decided to recognize him in this place without informing the government or the Ukrainian delegation or indeed any parliamentarian. I think we are all profoundly hurt and embarrassed by this, as are Canadians, and we need to take this seriously, not politicize it, because we need to make sure that we are bringing Canadians together during this difficult time.
The Honourable Member for Vaughan Woodbridge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituents in Vaughan Woodbridge are feeling the pressure of increased housing costs and grocery prices. This summer I heard them loud and clear. From the skilled trades workers who are building our homes and critical infrastructure, to the workers creating made-in-Canada products in the manufacturing sector, and the seniors who help build this country. That's why I was pleased to see our government introduce Bill C-56, the Affordable Housing and Groceries Act, as the next phase of our government's plan to bring down the cost of living for Canadians. Can the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance tell my residents what this bill would do? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the MP for Vaughan Woodbridge for his hard work for his constituents and all Canadians. Mr. Speaker, Canadians need more homes built faster, and they need affordable groceries. Bill C-56, which the government tabled last week, will help to provide both. With this bill, we are removing the GST from the construction of rental housing to build more homes faster. We are empowering Canada's Competition Bureau to help small grocers compete, and we are demanding CEOs of Canada's largest grocers present a plan to stabilize prices. We're going to continue to move forward with a serious plan to help Canadians.
Honourable Member for Skeena, Bulkley Valley.
Mr. Speaker, there is now a backlog of over 57,000 air passenger complaints before the Canadian Transportation Agency. Canadian travelers have had their lives upended. Many are out thousands of dollars. And for those who have managed to navigate a complex complaint process, they're having to wait well over a year to have their complaints heard. Now, this government is on its third attempt to fix this debacle. Will the minister apologize to Canadian travelers for failing so utterly to stand up to the big airlines?
Minister for Transportation.
Mr. Speaker, our government was the first to protect the rights of travelers, the first one, and we will make our passenger right regime even stronger by making compensation mandatory for disruptions, putting the onus on airlines, not passengers, and ensuring improved and standards level of service during any disruptions, Mr. Speaker. We've also invested in the Canadian Transportation Agency so that it can resolve the cases faster. It will be much faster, Mr. Speaker.
L'honorable député de Richmond.
The Honourable Member for Richmond-Arthabasca. Mr. Speaker, on December 2nd, February 15th, and March 23rd, I put questions to the government about a 30-year-old tax law that makes it so that Canadian companies are penalized by our tax system, despite the fact that they use exclusively local and healthy products. The government has told us that it wants to introduce a bill soon in order to help people cope with the soaring cost of the food basket. By addressing this situation, we will be encouraging people to buy healthier food at lower prices, and we will be putting an end to the injustice that makes SMEs compete unfairly against multinationals. This is a direct way to help Canadian families so that it costs them less to eat better. Does the government intend to make a change, take action?
The
Honourable Deputy Prime Minister. We can answer together. Mr. Speaker, we take the health of all Canadians seriously. We especially take seriously the health of our children. Our tax system is based on data, as is our health system. We will always implement health laws and tax laws based on data and based on the advice of experts. Thank you. That's all the time that we have for question period.
I understand there have been discussions among representatives of all parties in the House that there is an agreement to observe a moment of silence in honor of the fallen RCMP officer in Coquitlam, British Columbia. I understand the Government House Leader is rising on a point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to ask for unanimous consent to adopt the following motion. That notwithstanding any standing order, special order, or usual practice of the House, the recognition made by the Speaker of the House of an individual present in the galleries during the joint address to Parliament by His Excellency Volodymyr Zelensky be struck from the appendix of the House of Commons debates of Thursday, September 21st, 2023, and from any House multimedia recording. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Oh, yes, the Honourable. I guess we have to go to the, we'll ask about unanimous consent and go to it. All those opposed to the Honourable Ministers moving the motion will please say nay. We don't have unanimous consent. We have another order. We have another point on the Honourable Member for Charleswood, St. James, Assiniboia, Headingley, and then we'll go to Toronto Danforth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's important when we say no to this motion that is on such an important matter that we state our rationale. It would be order.
If I can ask the Honourable Member to start over. Order. If I can ask the Honourable Member to start over, I didn't hear what he started with or what he was saying, and determine, and I want to hear what he has to say, please.
To state the rationale why this motion is completely out of order. And that's why I'm rising on a point of order, Mr. Speaker. It would be absolutely wrong to strike what was said from the record. It goes without saying that those who do not learn from history are...
One moment, please. I'm going to ask the clerk to come up and try to figure out what is going on here so that we can call on it. 1 second. Order. 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 The Honourable Member for Charleswood, St. James, Assiniboia, Headingley. I'm curious to see where you're going. Please get to the point. I'm just...
But I appreciate your giving me the floor to explain our rationale. It goes without saying that those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. What happened on Friday was shameful and brought embarrassment to this chamber. It was an ugly reminder of what survivors of the Holocaust know too well, that we must never forget. Deleting the text of the Speaker's words from Hansard's would have...
I'm going to have to interrupt. I see this... I'm afraid it's getting into debate more than anything else. I'm afraid it's debate more than anything else, and I can't point of order on something that's already been voted on. I'm just trying to make some sense out of it. Okay. I mean, I'll let the honourable member go a little bit further, but I'm trying to figure out where he's going with this. I can't say that I disagree with what he's saying, but I just want to, it's not a point of order.
Deleting the text of the Speaker's words from Hansard would have only one purpose, to try and forget what happened, to wash the record clean. Removing this from...
I'm afraid this is debate. The honourable member for Calgary Nose Hill, and then we'll go over to... Or is it on the same item? No. Is this on the same item? Okay, the honourable member for Calgary Nose Hill.
My colleague from Winnipeg to continue to be heard, Mr. Speaker. I seek that.
All those opposed to the honourable member moving the motion will please say nay. Nay, we don't have that. The honourable member for Toronto Danforth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think that we can all agree that what happened here on Friday was deeply hurtful, and I'm getting to it. My point of order is actually that as a Jewish Canadian, I've been very much hurt by what I've been hearing and seeing. The member, when the government House leader was mentioning that she was the descendant of Holocaust survivors, the member from Haldimand, Norfolk said, the chickens have come home to roost. As a Jewish Canadian, that is so deeply hurtful to hear in this context, and I would ask that she apologize because it added to the pain we're feeling.
Okay, I'm not sure where this is going. L'honorable député de la Prairie.
The honourable member for La Prairie. A point of order? No, it's over.
Member for Regina Capel is rising on a point of order. Okay, is this on the same point of... Okay. The honourable member for Winnipeg North.
So, Mr. Speaker, my colleague just expressed in a valid point of order that she was deeply offended by what a member from across the way stated during question period. It is definitely appropriate to ask for an apology, and we look to the Conservative Party to provide that member the opportunity to do the right thing and apologize, Mr. Speaker. That was a point of order. At least let's afford the member the opportunity to apologize for the offence that we...
Is the honourable member ready? The honourable member, the honourable member for Kingston Frontenac is ready.
You got it, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, like the member who raised this, I too have Jewish ancestors. My mother is Jewish. Our ancestral village or town of Białystok in Poland, 95% of the Jewish population was murdered during the Holocaust. Every time the Liberal government missteps in this way, they pull this stunt of coming out and saying, oh, look at us, we have some kind of background, and then they find some word that was said by somebody else and say that person is anti-Semite. The fact is that the member from Haldimand, Norfolk was referring to the chickens coming home to roost for this government that consistently abuses human rights issues for its own partisan purposes. Shame on all of them.
The honourable member for Regina Capel is rising on a point of order.
Mr. Speaker, for the sake of clarity, this is a very, very important issue. One that this House did not ask to debate, by the way, Mr. Speaker. The reason why these points of order are going back and forth is because of decisions that were made last week. And I think it's incredibly important that all of us understand the context in which this occurs in. So I genuinely hope that my colleagues will grant unanimous consent to my request to table the reporting structure of the Parliamentary Protective Services, which states very clearly that it, quote, reports to the Commissioner of the RCMP on operational matters. That is the point that the line of questioning was making today, Mr. Speaker, about the government's responsibility to provide comprehensive vetting and background checks. I've got those two documents, including the Memorandum of Understanding signed between the Speaker of the House of Commons, the Speaker of the Senate, and the Minister of Public Safety, and the Commissioner of the RCMP. I'd like to table these two documents so that members can know what they're talking about when they're trying to run cover for this Prime Minister.
All those opposed to the honourable member moving the motion will please say nay. Nay, we don't have. We have the honourable member for South Surrey White Rock is rising on a point of order.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. On a separate point of order, while our member was speaking, a member of Jewish heritage, the member for Kingston the Islands used unparliamentary language again against one of our members, swearing at one of our members who's trying to make a point, a legitimate point about a very difficult and sensitive matter, particularly those of Jewish heritage. He should apologize again.
The honourable member for Kingston the Islands is rising.
I do apologize for saying shame on the member from Regina Capel.
The honourable member, please.
Mr. Speaker, I heard the utterance from that member. It included an expletive that was not included in his apology. Yeah. The government House Leader turned around and looked at him when he said it. She knows he said it. He knows he said it. His apology was not addressing the point raised by the official opposition whip. And
what we'll do, there's he said, she said, and of course I rely on the honourable members for what goes on. We're going to check the blues and to see what we've got, and then come back to the House should we see fit. We're all set? I'm sorry, what was that? Tabling of documents.
Introduction of government bills.
Statements by ministers. Rapport de délégation.
Reports from interparliamentary delegations.
Presenting reports from committees. The honourable member for Waterloo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pursuant to Standing Order 104 and 114, I have the honour to present in both official languages the 48th report of the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs regarding the membership of committees of the House. If the House gives its consent, I intend to move concurrence in the 48th report later this day.
Okay, introduction of private members' bill.